Hello, everybody, and welcome to another one of our webinars today. I'm finally back into it. I'll be back here. My voice is not fully there yet, but I'm delighted to be able to introduce and host Charlie, who I've known for about 18 months to maybe 2 years now, and absolutely brilliant speaker, and knowledge on, in particular, around the intersectionality conversation is incredible. And I've got to say, I've learned a lot by knowing Charlie in that space of time. So just a quick intro in terms of bio. So Charlie is AKA Awesome Charlie. Pronouns are she and they. Is a professional keynote speaker, experienced HR analyst, and a popular and influential intersectional neurodiversity advocate. You see, my son is trying to get involved in the bio as well there. So Charlie is bi-pan, autistic and ADHD, and has complex PTSD. They identify as a queer or DHDer, and Charlie's presentations and speeches centre their own lived experience, including insights and ideas underpinned with expertise in employment legislation and HR best practice, delivered with authentically neurodivergent quirkiness and dry, self-depreciating humour. Charlie is a passionate advocate for understanding, acceptance, and support for those on the double rainbow. Their advocacy work is not just a profession, but a personal mission, inspired by the memory of their firstborn child, Iggy. Charlie's goal is to make this world more accepting and welcoming for their remaining two awesome neurodivergent teenagers and others like them, a mission that inspires and motivates all who hear their story. And just in that short bio there, hopefully you'll get a reason why I am absolutely delighted that Charlie's here today. So I don't think anybody wants to hear me go like this for any minutes longer. So I'm going to pass it over to you.
Thanks, Si, and it's an absolute pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me. So yes, I'm going to talk about the double rainbow intersection. So this is about the intersecting identity experience of being both neurodivergent and LGBTQIA+. And this is a talk that I quite often do in a corporate sense, but also I myself am queer and autistic and ADHD, and so are my kids. So it's also as a parent. I don't tend to talk a lot to the education establishment about this, but like some of you will be affected by this personally. Some of you will be supporting kids who are, or be parents of kids who are. So I think it's something that we all need a light shone on. Where's the next button, Si? I can't see at my end. I can't hear you.
Maybe as you do when you're presenting your PowerPoint normally.
So I go back to my PowerPoint. Okay.
Yeah.
Is that change slides?
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Brilliant. So yes, my name's Charlie Hart. I started a neurodiversity advocacy social media presence 6 years ago when I was diagnosed autistic. So I call that Awesome Charlie with an AU for autistic. It's also my company now. I'm Awesome Charlie Limited. My pronouns are she, her, or they, them. My nouns are queer or DHD. My adjectives are autistic, ADHD, and awkward. So I'm going to give you an extract from my bigger talk about neurodivergence and intersectionality, and then take some questions as well. I'll talk a bit about neurodivergence itself, about autism, and then go on to talk about sexuality, gender identity, my own lived experience, and how you can be an ally. I do touch on some emotive subjects like bullying, discrimination, child death, and suicide. So please do step out if you need to. Please practice self-care. But I'm not going to leave you miserable here. The good news story is there's things that we can do to make this world more accommodating and a better place for people who are neurodivergent and LGBT. So hopefully it's inspiring and uplifting too. So the autistic spectrum, as you will already be aware, I'm sure, is very broad and varies greatly in how it affects different individuals. Not only in terms of how the different traits affect each individual, but it can fluctuate over time with hormone changes, depending on what's going on in your personal life or at work, things like that. And also the ADHD spectrum is just as broad, and pretty much so is any kind of neurodivergence. So yeah, the crossover that I've particularly looked into is between being autistic and LGBT, but there are also links between being ADHD and LGBT. And obviously there's a correlation between the different types of neurodivergence as well. So it's all intertwined. Likewise, sexuality, sex, and gender are broad spectrums that impact and affect different people in different ways. So if we just look at sexual orientation, for example, it's not as straightforward as you're just straight or gay or bisexual. There's many, many nuances of that experience. So I identify as bisexual and pansexual and queer, but it's even more complicated than that. The way that romantic attraction feels to me is different from the way that sexual attraction feels to me in terms of what genders I'm attracted to. But you can also be asexual, where you're not that attracted to individuals at all, whatever their gender. Demisexual, where you experience sexual attraction, but only if you've got a deep emotional connection with a person. So there's all kinds there. But then gender identity, yes, you can be a man or a woman, or a bit of both, or a bit of neither. It can change over time. But even sex assigned at birth is a spectrum. So yes, you can be identified male or female at birth, but also it's surprisingly common to be intersex and to not neatly align with either of those biological sexes. So it's all spectrums: the neurodivergent spectrum, the autistic spectrum, the LGBT spectrum. So, and it all uses rainbow imagery. The neurodiversity acceptance logo is a rainbow infinity symbol, and the pride flags use rainbow colors. So we can think of this intersection as being a double rainbow. So I live on a double rainbow. So a little bit about the broader intersectionality and intersecting identities. So this is a quote from Audre Lorde, who was a Black feminist lesbian poet. And she said, "There's no such thing as a single issue struggle because we do not live single issue lives." And yes, I completely agree. So we need to understand, to be able to support, accept, accommodate humans, that we aren't just one label and one identity, that we are the sum of our physiology, our experiences. We're extremely complex, like a human cocktail. And actually the different identities that we have can intersect in ways that can create a unique profile of marginalization or privilege. But let's look specifically at the intersection between LGBT and autism. So there's been quite a lot of studies done on this. Just looking at this recent one by Bush et al. About sexual orientation and autism, they found that over half of the people in their study were on the asexual spectrum. They were all autistic young females, and over half of them were identifying as asexual, and many, many others as bisexual or pansexual or demisexual. Only 8 of them identified as strictly heterosexual. So it's relatively rare to be straight if you're a young autistic woman, according to this survey, this study. Another study recently published in European Psychiatry examined autistic traits in the transgender and non-binary individuals. So even if those individuals that they looked at were not diagnosed autistic, they looked at their significant autism traits and found that there's a huge correlation. which is no surprise to me because I have a lot of friends who are autistic and trans and non-binary, and they do seem to go kind of hand in hand. And then gender non-conformity. So me, I don't identify as trans. I don't identify as a woman either. I've always been a tomboy. I'm not one of the girls, and I'm like George from the famous Five, and I do typically boyish hobbies and always have done. And I'm not comfortable with being lumped in with women as a group. So I consider myself to be gender non-conforming, which is why I use the pronouns she, her, or they, them. So another fairly recent study, Warrior et al., identified that there's elevated rates of gender non-conformity amongst autistic individuals. So they don't really know why, and it's better not to work out why, because it isn't that there's something wrong with us and they need to edit us out of the gene pool or something. So it just is. But it could be that we have a divergence in interpreting social norms. So we're less likely to be cis and het normative and more likely to do our own thing and identify in our own individual way. It could be that we just feel more freedom to express our gender identity without conforming to societal expectations. Maybe there's a biological cause, who knows? But why does it even matter? So autistic and LGBTQIA plus youth may require additional support compared with their neurotypical peers. This could include assistance in navigating social situations related to coming out, dealing with less accepting environments. So this really rings true to me. I realised I was bisexual in my mid-teens. I always had been, but I didn't really know there was a word for it. I came out at school actually on a sixth form residential trip, and it was during a game of Truth or Dare. I kind of thought my peers would be accepting, maybe even impressed. Maybe they'd think I was a bit edgy, a bit of a rebel. I don't know. But what actually happened is I was put under scrutiny and asked a lot of probing questions until I had a meltdown and ran off. And I didn't know I was autistic then. But yeah, I could have really done with somebody looking out for me and somebody helping me navigate that situation. And we're at increased risk of developing mental health issues. So this is quite common when you feel weird and different anyway. But if you've got a neurodevelopmental difference that causes you to feel chronically overwhelmed at times and struggle in this neurotypical world, then even more so. So this is how it began for me. Yes, I was a girl, not very girly at all. I always had short hair. I was into martial arts. I was into bird watching and karate and all kinds of things that were not typically little girl hobbies. And I cut my hair short when I was about 5 years old because I couldn't be bothered to brush it. And I also used to dress as a cowboy with a cap gun and a holster and a cowboy hat all the time. And it was just a better look. I was obsessed with the Dukes of Hazzard. I spent one weekend jumping in through the car window, pretending that I was in the Dukes of Hazzard. And so I wasn't very popular at school. I went to a school with no uniform and I was not trendy. So I was called square and even ugly. And I was bisexual, but I didn't know. It was, myself was a mystery to me kind of thing. So it's no wonder that the other kids didn't understand me either. But I got through school because I've got a really retentive memory and I'm quite intelligent, even though I have problems with inattention and daydreaming and working memory. But it's when I got to university that things really came unstuck. So again, there, I struggled to fit in. I was away from the boyfriend I'd had in sixth form, my best friend, my parents. So I really floundered socially. I tried to get past that by drinking a lot, taking drugs, and shagging around quite a lot, frankly. and doing very, very little study. I wasn't equipped to do a self-directed study at all. To be honest, I was not mature enough to be away at university without anyone looking out for me. Didn't know I was autistic, so there was never any kind of pastoral support or anything like that. I floundered. I ended up getting kicked out of uni. I didn't complete my first year because although I did the exams, I didn't do the coursework. I put myself in a lot of dangerous situations in terms of getting drunk and predatory behavior and not knowing that I was vulnerable, but somehow having a beacon above my head saying I'm vulnerable, prey on me. And I ended up getting into glamour modeling and kissograms. So suddenly the fact I was called ugly at school, it didn't matter so much because I was getting paid to do this glamour modeling. And just things got even worse for me. And all along I was struggling with friendships and relationships. I thought it was because I was bisexual. I thought it was that I found women a bit intimidating because I was attracted to them. And I had no idea I was autistic or ADHD. Eventually, I was quite lucky. I got a job in HR. It was a temping job, but I did really well. And they gave me a fixed term contract. I did my CIPD qualifications at Coventry Business School in the evenings. I learned to use Excel. I got into HR analytics and projects, and I did well, even though I lacked the tact and diplomacy to progress through the management hierarchy like some of my peers did. But 20 years I was in that job. I was an HR analyst. I was pretty good at it. I did experience some biphobia in the workplace, though, particularly from other women that were in HR. They could see my personal data. They knew I was bisexual. They thought that I was trying to get into their pants when I was just being friendly, things like that. So there's a lot of misunderstanding. I was married. I wasn't looking for anything like that, but there's a lot of misunderstanding about what bisexuality is, and a lot of people that think that it means that you're constantly trying to get into people's pants. But anyway, so I struggled at work. I struggled with being chronically overwhelmed, with not being accepted, not fitting in, not progressing, meeting barriers to progression, and my mental health severely wobbled. And then my son was born. So I was 27. I still didn't know I was autistic, but I had a little boy, Iggy, and he was very unconventional and weird, and he did everything strangely. He'd reverse himself up things instead of pulling himself up. He bum shuffled when other babies were learning to crawl. And I've put here chicken nuggets because, yeah, he was autistic as well. And that's an internationally recognized symbol for autism. He was also gay, as we found out as he got older. And he was quite girly, and he was bullied mercilessly for being girly, gender non-conforming. Yeah, he had a high-pitched voice, and he wasn't into the boy things at all as well. And then I found out I was autistic. I found out he was autistic. We went through the diagnosis at the same time. And I was told by a psychiatrist that there's a disconnect between my intent and how I come across, that I clearly have autism. And at that moment, everything fell into place. So many pennies dropped. I realized, actually, there's a concrete reason why I struggle with things that my intellectual peers take for granted. It isn't any of the things that I'd previously put it down to, including my sexuality. It's that my brain is wired differently, and that's okay. It doesn't mean I'm broken. It just means that I'm different and I need to approach things differently. I need to understand how my brain works. I need to advocate for my needs at work. So I was very happy, disclosed it at work. And yeah, I'd already got reasonable adjustments in place for anxiety, but from that time on, I was then able to start advocating for myself in other ways as well. So I was very open with my colleagues, my teammates. I worked in HR, which gave me a certain privilege because I knew that there wasn't any sort of systemic discrimination, that reasonable adjustment requests were taken seriously. And in fact, I already had some. So I was able to work from home a couple of days a week, even before the pandemic. People knew about my autistic blunt communication style. And so I was able to start really thriving in my role. But then tragedy struck. So Iggy was 15. He'd been bullied at school, as I mentioned, for being weird and different and gay and girly. And tragically, we lost him to suicide at the age of 15 in April 2019. This didn't stop me from advocating for autism and neurodiversity inclusion in the workplace, but it did mean that I started a more balanced approach. So it's just as important to me to talk about our needs, our struggles, our challenges, not just the things that we're good at that make us good at our roles. So things changed for me, but I kept going because I have two younger kids. So my daughters, they're teenagers now. They're both neurodivergent and queer as well. And I want to make the world a better place for them. So this is Iggy's legacy. I do a lot of work with Aim for the Rainbow. So that's a team within Autistic Meets, and we focus on trying to make the world a brighter place for young people who are both neurodivergent and LGBT. Small things, but I also paint neurodivergent affirming and LGBT affirming rocks and leave them around for people to hide. I do talks like this, obviously. And this is the initial rock here. I'd accidentally painted an inside out rainbow. I didn't realize. And when I showed it to my daughter and said, do you think I should change it? She said, no, it's different. And Iggy was different, and different is okay. So this is why I've coined the hashtag different is okay. It's okay to be autistic. It's okay to be neurodivergent. It's okay to be LGBTQIA+. Being cisgender and straight and neurotypical is not some kind of gold standard for humanity. So I am promoting acceptance, compassion, support, love, even for young people who are built differently. Like Maya Angelou said, if you're always trying to be normal, you'll never know how amazing you can be. So this is, again, Iggy's legacy. His awesome siblings. So Jay and Z here, they both celebrate being weird and different. They both think it's great to be neurodivergent. They wear their LGBTQIA+ status like a badge of honor. They march at Pride with Protect Trans Lives banners. And I'm so, so proud of them, and I love them to bits. I think they are awesome. I only wish that Iggy had been able to own that identity and rise above the bullying. I only wish that the bullies realised that different is okay and that it is not acceptable to pick on people for being weird and different. So I obviously accept my kids for who they are, all their quirks and foibles, all of their differences. And yeah, all you can do is radical acceptance. This isn't just for your kids, but for your friends, for kids at school, for colleagues. Let's refuse to be bullies and accept people for who they are. So I have a quote here from Cynthia Fortledge, who is a neurodivergent and trans speaker from, I think she lives in Canada. Acceptance without understanding teaches us to accept each other as human beings first. So you don't have to understand it. You don't have to relate to the trans or non-binary experience. You don't have to understand why somebody is gay or bi or asexual. You don't even have to wrap your head around the autistic experience or any other neurodivergent experience. You just need to practice radical acceptance. We're all humans, we're all different. And then the understanding comes later. And my youngest, I asked her what she thinks about why there's such a correlation between being neurodivergent and queer. And she said, we're just built diff, deal with it. So that's the Gen Z take on that. And I think we have a lot to learn from Gen Z. So things that we can do to help. We can create safe spaces and communities. So I've put a picture here of the trans tea rooms in Birmingham. So this is a safe space for trans and non-binary people. It's at the back of a church in Digbeth, and you can join that community if you're trans. Your kids can join it. Some of their meetings are only for adults, and others you can be 14 plus. They hosted Birmingham Trans Pride Picnic this year, and I took my kids, and they made friends straight away. Aim for the Rainbow. So we have a closed group for neurodivergent and LGBT people on Facebook. We also have a Facebook page where we promote understanding and acceptance, and that's for anyone, including allies. If you can do this at school, I mean, I got such a sense of belonging from my last 2 jobs. The fact that we had a neurodiversity employee resource group and we had an LGBT employee resource group. If I was working in a school, I would certainly do that for staff. I would certainly do that for kids. It can make a massive difference. And educating yourselves. So don't put all the onus on members of those communities to teach you everything. There's so much information out there. Look at the Transactual website, look at the Mermaids website and socials. I've got a bunch of allyship tips here. If I was doing a big corporate talk, I'd go through these in detail and I'd give you a lot of examples, but I do want to allow time to take questions, and you can book me for a talk if you want some more detail. But yeah, allyship 101, protect us and defend us from discrimination, gossip and bullying. We're human, we deserve dignity and respect. Please think about our dignity. Watch the jokes and banter. Self-determination. You can't influence an autistic kid to eat a vegetable they don't like, let alone what gender they should identify as. So yeah, challenge your expectations, consult us, and create an environment where we're safe to be ourselves, where we can drop the mask and not fear discrimination and bullying and worse. Believe us, accept us and support us, and love us for who we are, please. So thank you for listening. My name's Charlie Hart. You can book me for talks about neurodiversity or LGBT or both, or related topics. My LinkedIn page is here. My email address is here. Thank you very much.
Well, firstly, though, Charlie, thank you very much for presenting today, and hopefully the audience will see why personally, I've felt really privileged to listen, and I've heard the main talk of this as well, and it is incredibly informative. So if you really want to dig into more about this topic, please do approach Charlie, because her talks are not just really informative, but I've enjoyed the way that you deliver it too, and it's it just shows the human nature, isn't it, that people possess. So whilst people are thinking about questions and putting them in the chat, and we'll see what time we've got to ask them, I think a key thing that seems to crop up quite a bit is the issue of conformity. And also how enforcing conformity can really have a lot of damaging effects on psychological well-being.
Yes.
And I've always found that it's like with conformity, kind of having that kind of mentality, it's like it's implying that agenda of integrating into normative environments, full stop, which is what what the society evolved over time to this point. And I think that when you're listening to such incredible, I don't want to use the term stories, because stories make it sound like don't sound like the impact that it actually has. Your story had a great, massive impact on you, and yeah, I thank you a lot for that. But I think that with this, I'm still talking, just waiting for some of the questions to see if they appear. But even in this talk, there was a panel talk last night about neurodivergence and ethnicity as well, and just general anything to do with neurodiversity. a key message that's constantly coming back is please accept who we are.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
I have an anecdote, actually. It's in one of the first blogs I wrote about my experiences as an undiagnosed neurodivergent woman going through education and employment. And this is from before I realised I was autistic, but I knew that I wasn't getting the exceed ratings at work, and I knew that I wasn't getting promoted, and I wasn't going to end up in a leadership role, and I wanted to know why. And I was recommended for some interpersonal skills training. So that's like ABA light for professional adults, really. A jovial chap of an L&D consultant was talking to me about interpersonal skills and how I can do more small talk and banter. And so I was an HR systems analyst, and he was saying that I'd get more results with the vendor when I raise a call about a problem with the system if I could remember the names of their kids and ask them questions about where they'd been on holiday and things like that. And that I would also get on better with my colleagues as well if I could ask them what they were up to over the weekend and things. So he was teaching me how to try to pass as a neurotypical when I didn't even know I was autistic. The impact to me is I felt like there was something fundamentally wrong with my personality and that I was broken and I needed to be fixed, which is pretty soul destroying, really, when you're an adult trying to make your way in the world, trying to have professional credibility. And, it's so why do we do that to kids as well? Because they're even more sensitive to people telling them there's something wrong with them.
Yeah, it's almost like that these initiatives that you see, it's actually more accurate to say, I don't know. It's like it's intensive masking training.
Yeah.
It's not actually having the effect that people think it's having. And I think that's quite a bit of an issue. And again, it centers around that medical model mentality, isn't it? And
yeah, we're not
there's something wrong with you.
Yeah. So that story got picked up by Professor Ludmila Praslova, and it's in her book, The Canary Code, which I really recommend reading. So it's a really good book full of case studies about intersectional inclusion and belonging. So mine's quite near the end. It's a really accessible book as well. If you haven't got the attention span to read a lengthy book, you can just read the summary of each chapter. So it's got like headlines and then a deeper dive and then the more detail. So you can actually go through it just reading the summary of each chapter. Yeah. It teaches you a lot about culture, and based on the idea that canaries in the coal mine, neurodivergent employees and kids, presumably in schools as well, they will pick up on a toxic environment and it will affect them first. So if you look after them and fix the environment, then everybody will thrive.
Yeah, and that's the whole sort of reason why I constantly drop in the question is how many neurodivergent teachers leave a profession, how many teachers are leaving the profession of neurodivergent, because it's based on that canary in the coal mine theory. Yeah. And so it's, and unfortunately quite often when things happen, it takes a tragedy before somebody changes something. And a prime example is your lovely Iggy, isn't it? For they trade the trauma, the pain, everything that he must have been going through. Because obviously I didn't know him, but that's what you've told me about him. He sounds like an absolute star, but what he's had to endure to that point to feel that there was no longer anything else to do other than to feel that his life needed to end, and it takes
like life passes your ability to cope, I think, and I can see your little boy in the background.
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely.
So yeah, we need to be saving people before they get to that point,
Yeah.
or just making the world more inhabitable in the first place.
It's that being proactive instead of reactive. And unfortunately, given how fast-paced the world can be, a lot of people are sort of reacting to things rather than thinking about how can we prevent this from happening in the future. A lot of focus on sticky plaster things like I'm going to get shot down for this, mental health first aid, because why have we got something focused on mental health first aid and not really looking at what's causing the issues? Let's start having the conversation about removing the root causes to these issues so people can lead a happy and healthy and accepted life.
I think it was
to be themselves.
Tutu who said, rather than pulling people out of the river, let's go upstream and find out why they're falling in. And I completely agree. And yet it's really strange because every new term I get more emails from my daughter's schools about new draconian rules that they're bringing in and things. And I have to keep advocating for my kids to be treated like small humans. And we've all got our own individual needs and preferences and things that can help us to thrive.
And
I don't give a toss if my daughter's attendance is less than 95%. I want her to survive to adulthood.
Yeah, and that kind of leads on to the things like school avoidance, which I had a chat with somebody else earlier. Well, not earlier today, it was pre-recorded, but there's so many avenues that can be explored, and it's also based on what people have experienced today. And this is what's wonderful about the neurodivergent community, is that there's a lived experience and knowledge in there that can really help shape and be proactive in changing systems that are normative.
Yes.
And it's a question of how can people that are in positions of authority start to access this lived experience and knowledge to make that difference, and moving away from this integration mentality into one of inclusion. And because they are two very separate things, integration and inclusion, and I think that we have an opportunity as a society, and and there are plenty of people out there that want to make these changes, but just unsure how to go about it. And one of the things that are really good practice, and you alluded to it earlier, from an employment point of view, is employee resource groups.
Yes.
And when you start thinking about employee resource groups, you can generate that knowledge from the lived experience. And then if you apply a change management strategy like John Cotter's, where he talks about having a guiding coalition, that is an ERG.
Absolutely.
So, there's tools out there in leadership and management that can help do this. And I think that it would be great for communities to be able to get together and share that knowledge and be proactive in making change. So I got on my soapbox a little bit there.
No, it's all good stuff, yeah.
But it's like the same for me and my children. And we have a shared experience of child loss. Like yourself, I've got two children who need that support. And little Phoenix, who's been running around the background, I don't mind him running in the background. Like, yeah, he can be himself, but he has the signs of having complex needs. So, because he struggles he can't communicate verbally. So we have to think about how do we help him to be able to communicate. And then also we have to make the effort to understand what he's trying to say, what he's trying to express.
Yeah.
And it's that
cooperation. Alternative communication methods and accessibility, rather than seeing him as a problem that needs to be fixed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then what results then is he's a happy little lad. And you've met him, haven't you? So he's
he's adorable.
Proper pocket rocket. His nursery love him to bits, and the nursery are great. They're really good with him, and the other children around him really accepting, and it just shows it can be done. It can be done. So I've tried to waffle as much as I possibly could,
Yeah.
but we've got some lovely comments in there. So no questions, but some comments. So thank you for sharing your story, Charlie from Rachel, and also Brooke as well. Thanks, Charlie. And yeah, as always, it's been an absolute pleasure. And do you have any last words you'd like to share?
Just like I said before, believe us and accept us and love us for who we are.
I couldn't agree more. Well, thanks very much, Charlie. And to all those that have watched the video and will be watching the video retrospectively as well, hope you've found this this session incredibly informative. And let's work together, because there is strength in diversity and there's absolute power in unity. So take care, everybody, and thank you, Charlie.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.